Welcome to the channel Tribe. This episode is a part of our virtual meetup series. In this episode, we have Priyanka Halder talking on scaling quality engineering in a hyper-growth startup with automation, AI and ML.
Social media, Pretech Mom. Please hit me up in Twitter or check out my website, pretechmom.com. One thing I do is I'm in a mission to prove that there is no 100% bug-free software. So I find various bugs in various apps, very big apps. So the left side is Yelp and the right side is AMC Stub. Both are very popular app in the United States, and you can see some very weird bugs are happening on their systems. And I love TribalConf when Mahesh does those posts every Friday. Love to participate in that and put those bugs and memes and all those. These are few more. So I specialize in visual bugs. So like one of the visual bugs that came into from Facebook on the middle, posts showing up twice, right side. Instacart, again, a very big grocery shopping app in United States, and left side Amazon. So production bugs exist, and I love to capture them. So about this talk, scaling QA at a startup, it feels like this cheetah who is running at an extreme speed. Like speed is everything in the startup world. And when you, especially you are in QA and every time your time is crunched, the testability is not in mind. How do you cope up with that and what it looks like? And that's the talk I'll be giving today. So this is what exactly I do in my day-to-day life. I join a company. They are playing like a play of mole, where they are finding a bug, fixing it, finding a bug, fixing it, adding more developer, adding more QA. But we try to go towards the right side, which is game of operation, where a developer can push anytime during the in the production, and they will be told by our system that, oh, you have touched a wrong chord, and a red bulb will show up and say that please fix your test before you go to production. So what is a startup? I'm not sure how many of the participants are from startup, but there is a very good book called Inspired by Marty Kagan, and you can learn about what exactly a startup about if you work in a very big multinational companies. When I was in India back in 2006 to 2010, lot of big companies like Infosys, Accenture was in play. Not a lot of startup was in play, but it has already changed the scene. But here in the United States, startup means they are trying to find their product, they're trying to find their market fit. They are looking for a viable business, right? So they are constantly fighting with like product market fit. They sometimes run out of their money. So all the resources are very, very limited, and the closure they come to running out of the money, the run for more features, more pace taking place, right? So like in one short, startup is obviously very, very chaotic. Like when you start your career in a startup, you will need to know that you have to be very, very comfortable with change. One day they will be working on one feature, next day it will be scratched and something else. So if you don't like changes, startup is not for you. Most of the time it's like all hands on deck. Like I have worked in a company where we have worked till 2 a.m. at night to make some feature happen, then you have to be flexible on those front as well. And in startup, like the learning opportunity is immense. Like within 3 to 6 months you become like expert of the whole architecture. Like you will be knowing a lot about how the deployment processes are, like very nitty-gritty things you will be able to learn, whereas in big corporations it takes months and months to even know how some parts of the company is working, right? Also, like the rewards, they give us a lot of parts, and the expedient learning is definitely a big plus. So why do we need to like work in a very high speed when we work in a startup or so like today, right? So this from Sauce Lab blog, and it's eye-opening. Like back in 2006 when I used to work for Accenture, like we used to have desktop apps. Our client was AT&T. Our releases were quarterly or annually. Then came like 2010ish, and we became more comfortable with desktop and responsive web. And today's work, like web apps and mobile apps, like we have apps which like works both on web and mobile web platform. And then mobile apps is very heavy today, right? So back again 2000ish, we started with waterfallish, and we are now right now going on continuous delivery, where anybody in our team can push to production, and they can release on demand. Like they don't have to have a release cadence, or they don't have to have a quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily release, right? Again, like back in 2000, HP was a very big hit, QTP, right? Proprietary single stack on-prem softwares, whereas today it's open source world. You have everything on tip of your finger, and like you can use any software you want. So the world is changing in a rapid way, and that's why like you have to work in a very high speed. So whenever I joined, like how did we achieved um, this high speed in a hyper growth startup, right? So I always chose these three different wheels for my success. So the first one is learn from failure. So unclear requirements, impossible deadline, and waterfallish like project setup, and unhelpful tools. Like these are some of the biggest failure reason that come up in my career every time I join a company, because either the whole team is all over the place, they don't know what exactly the feature works like end to end, impossible deadline, sometimes they give us few hours to do the whole regression, waterfall like project setup, like they will not give us ticket by ticket, like they will give a very big chunk of ticket to QA, and that becomes the bottleneck, and end of the day they will say, oh, QA is a bottleneck, it's blocking us to go to production. And definitely unhelpful tools, like I have seen companies where there were tools they were using and everybody was trying to make a progress in that, like no owners, they are like just scripts, no framework, so that definitely does not help. And so the next one is test heuristic, like some of the modern approaches if we take, like that definitely helps us move forward in a startup. Instead of test case writing or using a test management tool like TestRail or something, though we still use it in GoodRx sometimes for newer projects, like mind map makes a huge difference, where you don't have to specify everything in very details. You can just use mind map, show it to the product and developer, and they can understand how the test coverage will be. Short-term tool versus long-term tool. So when you don't have much resources to hire a lot of folks, how will you do your strategy? I think we use like Applause, a crowdsource company, for longest time for one of my company called Homey, because they did not have budget to hire full time. So for long term, if a project is going to be ongoing, we would be choosing a full time hire. So like again, even for tool also, like for short term you can use crowdsourcing. For long time you will be thinking about how you can automate it and go forward, right? Finding bugs early, so shifting left. Don't find bug only like when that product feature comes to you, but try to be involved from the requirement phase, and then try to find gaps in requirement, in design. Like once you start becoming SME, finding bugs becomes very, very important. Then introducing some very minute things like shift left meetings. If you do a demo on with developers on their desk, right, when they develop the feature, and if they can do a rundown with you, you can save time, you don't have to file bugs, and you can find bugs then and there. Again, set achievable goals. So in my current company, GoodRx, when I joined and there were no team as such, right, and I had only 2 more people with me, we actually wrote down our quarterly goal in an Excel sheet, show it to our CTO, got the goal, and then we performed on that. So having a set of achievable goal helps a lot to move forward in a startup, and it becomes clear what we are trying to achieve. Playbooks, having documentation, what your regression suite means, how to run it, how to install your test, where does it resides, who can be contacted. This kind of playbooks helps immensely when there is a chaotic situation. So people know, okay, I will go to Confluence and I will look at this space and I will know how to do what, right? And today in this talk, I'm going to more talk about a scalable toolkit that's going to help you immensely. So team structure, industry standard, automation framework, AI and ML support are 4 of the scalable toolkit I always use in my current practice, and we're gonna talk more about what each of this means. So team strategy, again, every company is very unique, but what worked best for me is having a combination of people, separate estate tooling team who are expert of their automation, their framework, extensive exploratory test experience, offshore team. So though a lot of company talks about going automation first, the reality is when a startup works to push a lot of production, a lot of feature to production in a very minimum time. Maybe sometimes environments are not available, sometimes like I don't have automation engineer to automate it at that time, and sometimes we are in very tight deadlines. So that time this offshore team works immensely. My offshore team is in Mumbai. I use a company called Software QA, and what we do is the on-site QA engineer writes all the testing, and they specify which browser devices it has to be run, and our offshore tester run them and send us the result overnight. And it has been like immensely successful to have the speed we have, right? Then using crowdsourced team where we need it. So for any mobile application, finding crashes are the biggest challenge, right? And having maybe 2 or 3 QA in one team does not help find all the crashes possible. So when you use crowdsourced team like Applause or Test.io, some 40 odd people comes and test, and I get a lot of people even from India who comes and test our team, test our product, and we find like bugs that would have missed by the in-house QA. So that helped us immensely. Then augmenting team. So we even have augmented team in GoodRx, where like we had immediate project that spawn up, and I did not have time to hire full-time engineers. So having a trusted consulting firm who can augment your team helps immensely. And lastly, like embedded teams. So as you grow your team, having agile teams and having QEs part of that agile teams, writing BDDs and implementing them like helps immensely. So these are the some team strategies that I have been very, very successful implementing in some of my companies. And I think like that gonna help a lot of you guys if you follow this. Second, in industry standards. So whenever like we try to grow our automation, we always follow like where industry is, so that we are not like in our own la la land, and we are thinking that okay, we know what we are doing, and we have 15,000 test cases and it takes 8 weeks of time to run, or 40 hours to run. Like I don't think those kind of automation helps at all in a team. So where industry is and where you are learning, that helps a lot. So I personally follow a lot of industry standard, and one of my favorite is Sauce Lab. They have even published their 2020 this year, and it's fascinating where industry is today. So they published in 4 categories this result: testability, runtime, platform coverage, and concurrency. And so they said that the ideal will be 90% of your tests should pass in your CI/CD. All tests should be 2 minutes or less, like each test, and platform coverage should be 5 platform and more, obviously, if your product supports that. Concurrency, 75% should be 75% of your concurrent parallel should be utilized during your peak time, right? But on this big circle, the number you see, that's exactly what the industry are today. So they did this survey with some of the biggest clients they have. Only 18.8% companies had 90% success rate passing their test in their CI/CD pipelines. Only 18.8% had only 2 minutes or less as a test. Only 62.5% of the companies had like greater platform coverage, and 70.9% of the companies were utilizing their parallels that they were buying for companies like Sauce Lab or BrowserStack. So like after we learned all this benchmarking stuff, like where industry is, it became very easier for us to enhance our automation framework and get to this point. So when they ran that industry, like it shows that our industry is very heavily running automation on Chrome. i11 has only 12% automation, Firefox around 10%, and Safari is even lowest, 6% adoption. And irony is like GoodRx biggest customers are on Safari. So from the very beginning, we had to support Safari as a like one of the automation client, right? Again, in industry, lot of people, when it comes to mobile web, they just resize their desktop web and they test it. It's only 8.1% adoption on mobile web, and even on iOS native app and Android native app, the percentage is super low, 8.9 and 13.2. So it shows that somebody, if you hire in your team or you're working with who has extreme knowledge in native app automation, that will be an asset as well. So when you go through this kind of industry standard, there are a lot of things to learn from them, and we do the same. So after we learned and like we regularly learn this kind of industry standard, like we learned in 2019, we stood this year also 2020 they have published, and we are constantly working on our automation framework to achieve those industry benchmark, right? So some of the point that I found very, very helpful when we created our automation framework was going open source. So we use Selenium and Python Behave, and that has been very, very helpful to not have like on prem proprietary kind of a software, that because that sometimes like bite in the back when you're waiting for them to release something. Whereas if you find something in open source, you can even enhance it and fork it and have your own flavor of it as well. And some example will be, we use Behave, and Behave had a parallel on their Git repo, but it did not work for us. So our engineer created own Behave parallels for us to work on. And again, like I'm pretty sure a lot of people knows, but these are the 4 major categories. When you choose an automation framework, you should be thinking about maintenance cost, faster to shape, very like the community is very proactive around, so like you are not waiting longer, easier to expand, right? And some of the things that we obviously follows in our framework is like assertion for action, initialization and cleanup, data modeling and mocking wherever it's needed, separating configuration utils files, setting abstractions, wrappers and helpers. So any third-party tool we use wrapper and helpers. Whenever we can use APIs, we use APIs. Like for registrations and stuff, feature ready product like local and cloud setup. So use browser stack. Speed is definitely one of the core key that I'm talking about today, right? So speed of our automation framework is absolutely needed. Cross browser support, simulators, debugging features, and I'm gonna talk more in detail as I go through my slides. So one of the core core features in GoodRx automation is adoption of AI ML that made it very, very speedy and like 100% faster than you could imagine. And that's something I'm going to talk about today. So one of the very key one of the key feature of our functional automation is visual regression, which is top of our functional automation we run. And as Applitools mention it, it's like adding a eyes to your functional automation. It's like it validates the look and feel of your user experience. So with functional validation, you can say, hey, when I click on login, I should be land on login page after I enter password and username. But with visual validation, you could ask like, does my login screen actually appears right, like renders right on IE? Does it render right on mobile web, right? And that has helped us immensely to reduce the regression time by 86%. Again, this is one of my very favorite workshop that I do. I usually ask spot 9 differences between these 2 images. And Mahesh, if you can open up the mic, if somebody wants to participate and tell me what differences they see in these 2 different pictures, it will be awesome to get some feedback from the audience. You guys have 30 seconds.
There is text on the top, bottom left, bottom right.
Right.
Additional fence.
The hand is missing and the blue one.
There's no leg.
Yes, absolutely. There's no leg for the dog.
Dog, yeah.
Anyone else?
Missing every one.
Sorry, I can't hear you properly.
The helmet stripes of that blue color
Yes.
is one
Right.
is quite big and another one is quite small.
Sure.
The
Anything
hand
else?
is too big of the red one.
Yes, hand size is small and big. True. Anything else? There are more. Okay. But awesome part.
Icon one missing.
Helmet one, helmet
Yes.
line.
Yes, somebody mentioned helmet. So these are actual
The
all the
right
different.
corner, right bottom corner of the picture.
Yes, absolutely. So these are the actual differences. You guys found a lot of them, but again, like I saw some 5 to 10 people participate telling me in 1 minute what are the various difference. Just think if one person can tell me in 30 seconds, very difficult, right? All the differences, and sometimes it's very difficult to figure out the difference like this one where the stripe is little bigger and smaller, though somebody already found it here. Also, no one told me about this hand. This hand is on a different angle actually. Here it's little up, here it's little down. Like very difficult by human eyes to catch, whereas a computer program can catch it within seconds, right? Again, when it came to visual validations, we cannot do beat by beat comparison, which is the example here, because if you think about GoodRx.com, it shows actually prescription prices, and those prices changes every day. So if I have a visual validation which checks bit by bit, then it will fail every day as the price changes. So for that we needed AI ML enable visual validation tool, and we use Applitools for that. But after using that, it has increased our velocity, release velocity like no other. Also, some of the advantages that gives is it learns every time you thumbs up or thumbs down. So it learns if a visual difference that it has detected, is it right or wrong. So that way it knows next time it should detect it or not. It also has its own algorithm. It gives us different types of matching. So you can say match bit by bit. You can say just match the layout. You can say just match the content, but don't match anything else. You can also tell it to match exact locations of it. One more feature is that you can tell it to ignore some region of a website or an app, right? So for us, it helps immensely where we say that ignore all the prices on a given page. So that helps us a lot. One more feature that they have recently launched is having A/B tests. So if you guys don't know what the A/B testing is, a website like GoodRx launches a lot of features in a given day, but most of the features are only available to few percentage of the people, because we first want to learn if people are liking it or not, or if it's affecting our core funnel, which means think of GoodRx.com homepage, it has suggested drugs. We might be introducing 5 more drugs on suggested drugs, right? But only maybe 5 out of 100 people will be getting 15 drugs out of instead of 10 drugs, right? So that's called A/B testing, which A means the control, like what the 100% of the people, like 100% people should be seeing as, and B means like the variation. So it can have B or C variations where 5% of the people are seeing 15 different prescriptions, drugs, suggested prescription drugs, right? And again, Applitools gives us the option to verify both of them using their functionality, which becomes very easy for us. So we don't have to write 2 different tests for 2 different variations. So that becomes very easy for us as well. The next machine learning tool we use is called reportportal.io, and that's our reporting dashboard. Again, another extraordinarily good machine learning testing product. This is open source, you don't have to pay for it. So you can download and play it. Only drawback is it's not SaaS, so you have to deploy it on AWS or some container to use it, like Docker container to use it. So what we do is we send all our information to report portal, and then it tells us like how long a build took to run. When it has started like 24 minutes ago, it took 6 minutes, 8 seconds, how many total tests we are running, how many passed, how many failed, how many skipped. how many we should investigate, if it is an automation bug, if it is a system issue, if it is a product bug. So as more and more you feed data into it, its machine learning learns, looking at the bugs, what different kinds of bugs are. It also a one-stop shop where we could feed it where exactly the problem happened. So for our developer, it's very easy to come here, look at the steps where it failed. It also look at the stack trace, that what exactly is going wrong. We use BDD, so for them it becomes very easy to understand that which step it has failed. Then another tool we use is an internal test portal. Here they can see in one-stop view what the different kind of tests are in our system. So we have almost 560 tests so far, no, around 800 tests so far in various projects, and like they can come to this portal and they can see everything together. So I spoke about a lot of things, just want to run it through using our GoodRx case study. Again, GoodRx is a prescription drug saving portal. We are also venturing into telemedicine. So a lot of good functionalities, functional projects are happening around. This coupon is our bread and butter. So email texting of coupon is one of the core functionality that we have to maintain throughout. So the first project that we worked on is called WebQA. It's a UI test automation framework, primarily used for acceptance testing. We wrote it in Python. We utilized Behave and Selenium WebDriver. So currently our framework supports a lot of GoodRx product. It's goodrx.com, GoodRx native app, AAA RX, Kroger RX. So these are various projects that we are supporting using our framework. And one of the beauty is we do not write different tests for all these 4 different flavor of GoodRx. It's only one test with different tagging. So we have quite a few third-party integration. We use MailSource as our virtual SMTP server. As I told you that emailing coupon and authentication is one of our core functionalities. So instead of using Gmail-like tool, we use this open source tool MailSource, where you can utilize their APIs and you can test sending the authentication or emailing of coupon, and also how the coupons are rendering. The second one integration is with Twilio. This is a programmable SMS. So again, we make sure that all our text coupon and text authentication is working through Twilio. Again, report portal, already spoke. That's our open source reporting dashboard. We also use Datadog, and I'm going to show you an image of that. So how we make sure our tests are very, very stable and has 0.12% of error rate, or 1.12% of error rate using this Datadog. So again, we feed all the logs to Datadog, and we make sure we constantly monitoring which tests are slow, which tests are taking most longest time in which browser, what time of the day we are running most of the tests. So that gives us all internal information that we need to make sure our tests are running optimally. And we use BrowserStack for our cloud-based browser mobile device grid. Apply tools for visual comparison. So these are some of the data. Yeah, I was right. Like our error rate is 0.14%. So this, I did not make it. It's a screenshot from BrowserStack Analytics dashboard. It's showing from February to April, we have ran 310,000 tests. We almost use all our parallel node, and we have only 0.14% error rate, 1.18% fail rate, and most of the time those fail means actual bugs, and 94.87% passing rate. Again, on a given day, it's showing that we run almost 16,000 tests. And we use BDD very heavily, and it has been one of the key to run a very successful QA team in a hypergrowth startup with a record number of speed. So how we do it, we have our QE team. So whenever a feature starts, we get involved from the requirement phase, like for requirement gathering there, we detailed out like what kind of test we're gonna write for core path, for edge cases. Then our QE goes and they start drafting this BDD field, and they implement it with help of our estates. So they are also stepping up every day. Again, we use visual comparison in our each test, and that has helped immensely because GoodRx is very content heavy. So think if you have to like test without automation for almost 300 pages, it's gonna take 6 hours of regression time. So using visual validation, we have cut it down to like 6 minutes to 8 minutes. And report portal, again, very interesting subject. Like the way we feed the information to it, it is like that. So it detects feature files. A job launches various feature files. Each feature files has various scenarios, and each scenario has various steps. So it actually gives us all this view. It gives us the job view, the feature file view, the scenario view, and the steps view as well, along with screenshots of any failure. And similar kind of screenshot that I already shared. And this is the Datadog dashboard that I spoke about. So the C is showing you what are our most failing tests and how many times it failed in a day, flakiest test, slowest test, slowest browser, runtime retries, like how many times a test has been retried, test runs, what time during the day we ran most of the test, test run times, like what time of the day it took longest, right? So this gives us, is it an environment problem, is if our third-party tooling is not running optimally. So this dashboard gives us huge benefit. And lastly, we are very happy the way we have implemented our functional and visual testing, but we are taking a leap into 2020, just finish our analytics framework. I know, like, I actually tweeted one day and asked for how people are doing analytics testing. A lot of people are just do without automation, manually, right? They test all the events and stuff, but in GoodRx, we have again used Selenium and Browser Stack, and we are testing it automatically. And maybe in future I will talk in detail like how we have conquered that. Accessibility is one of the things that we are trying to solve as well. More test run optimization, synthetic monitoring, and we are also working on a JS framework in 2020. So definitely, like, working in a startup is a very interesting game altogether, and the learnings are awesome. Questions?
Thank you so much, Priyanka. It was really very insightful.